Well, I don't hear anything, but it's probably me. So that's my introduction to the Power Rankings podcast, the Power Rankings show. I assume we're on. If you're watching us, then we're on. So welcome. I'm with Marcus Mosher, as always. That's at Marcus_Mosher for all of you who follow along gleefully to our wonderful little podcast that we built here. And Marcus, we have a lot to get to. I know that you kind of want to drive the ship today. You've been very power hungry as of late, I would say. And, I'd like to hear what you've got going.
Yeah, I've got Pro Bowl takes I need to get off my chest. I've got some coaching stuff that we need to discuss. So I'm fired up.
Yeah, it's always a great way to start your podcast by saying, I can't hear anything.
I mean, you are getting pretty old, yeah. So let's be honest.
My hearing is actually outstanding. At least that's what my mother tells me. She said, you have really good hearing. So there you go. I don't know what you have to say about that. So I know you want to talk some coaches and some other things. So I think we should jump right into it. And I need to take you to task for something, but I'm going to.
Jeez, yeah. Already upset with something I said or tweeted. That's pretty early.
I'm not upset with it. I just, I want you to know where you stand in the world.
All right, let's start with the Dolphins, who officially announced on Sunday afternoon that they've hired Mike McDaniel, the San Francisco 49ers offensive coordinator. This was something that at least I've been pushing for a while. I really think Mike McDaniel is going to be a good coach. He's part of that Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay tree. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Elliot. What do you think about Mike McDaniel in Miami?
Oh, boy. There's so many different parts of this. One, your comment that the nerds won was funny. I enjoyed that. And, I hear he's a real football savant, a running game savant, which I really like that. And I love the way that the 49ers ran the football this year, not just with Debo, but with Elijah Mitchell as well. I thought they were very creative in their run game. They tried some things that frankly didn't work in the postseason. The Trent Williams pulling plays didn't really work, but
it did a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to try new stuff, and it's kind of like your point on the Rams. They've tried a different way of doing it, and it worked for them, and they should have won the stupid championship game. But that's another talk that we'll have in June or something.
Do you think this is a good pairing? Do you think it's a good pairing in Miami with Tua?
I don't know. I mean, a couple things. I don't need to hear that he's biracial in the tweets and stuff out announcing it. That was my first thought is, my gosh, guys. Okay. Are you trying to show that the owners are doing a good job? I think whose Twitter I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
I don't, I'm glad that he's proud of his, background, and I appreciate that his father is Black. But when you tweet it out like that and everything, it makes it like that's the headliner. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it should
be his resume, which is incredible, right? And I think this is why I was so excited about him as a head coaching candidate, is because you look at what he's done over the last 10 years as an offensive mind, and he's really, really good. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that the NFL has hired a Black coach, I guess. But when I say I guess, because I don't want this to be a reaction to Brian Flores. I want guys to be hired on their own merits. I want Black head coaches to be hired on their own merits, not as a response. It just seemed a little convenient to me that it was the Dolphins that had this hiring. I kind of agreed with you. I mean, or I don't remember if it was you, but you already had Brian Flores, Yep. So I almost would have rather seen the Dolphins retain Flores and seen another team hire Mike McDaniel. Does that make sense?
Yes and no. I get what you're saying, but I think this might be an upgrade for the Dolphins.
You think this might be an upgrade?
I do.
Okay.
Because I feel like that team went about as far as they could with a defensive-minded coach, right? Like,
yeah,
Flores is he's so good on that side of the ball, but if you don't have an elite quarterback, I'm not sure if Flores is going to be the guy to help you elevate and develop that quarterback. I think he would be really good in a situation where you already have an established veteran that doesn't need a lot of work. I think with Tua and with that offensive line, with how bad it was, I think they needed somebody like Mike McDaniel. And I think long-term, this is going to be the better move.
I thought an interesting pairing would have been with the Raiders. Obviously, they hired
I
Josh
agree.
McDaniels, but that would have been a very interesting pairing. All I'm trying to say here is the way the announcement was made over social media, it made race the issue here. And I don't want to think that, and I'm sure he doesn't, Mike McDaniel doesn't, that's not how he wants to be known. You could be, and I don't mean that he's not proud. I just mean that, that's not the only headline here. And, I feel like there are people out there that are minimizing this hire because they think the NFL is trying to cover its butt, so to speak, right? And even with the Mike McDaniel hiring, it does not solve this issue. It's still a major, major issue regardless. So
sure.
Those are kind of the mixed feelings that I had on it. Like I said, I'm glad the NFL got another minority head coach. I think that's great. And I'm super glad that that trend is now going the other direction, but it certainly doesn't solve the issue. And it shouldn't be the only headliner here of him getting hired. How good of football mind he is and other things should be a part of it too. Just like Eric Bieniemy, right? You were saying last week that you thought Eric Bieniemy should get more interviews. And with Eric Bieniemy, it's always about that he's a black head coach. And how about just that Eric Bieniemy is good at football?
He's a Eric good coach.
And Eric Bieniemy's been a really good assistant coach. He was a running back in the NFL. And so that's that thought. My last thought on it is
can I pause real quickly and talk to you about Bieniemy? Just to update this. I saw a report yesterday from NFL Media's Tom Pelissaro that Bieniemy's contract is actually up now with Kansas City, and he's considering leaving to take an offensive coordinator job elsewhere because it might enhance his chances of getting a head coaching job next year. Because I think a lot of people are wondering, like, is it just Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, and that's why Bieniemy is good? I actually think this might be a good thing. If Bieniemy could leave and let's say go to, I don't know, Baltimore, and let's say he works with Lamar Jackson and really helps Lamar develop as a passer, it might actually help him get a coaching job faster than just staying in Kansas City attached to Mahomes and Reid.
But there are a lot of other dudes that don't need to do that.
And I agree. That's what's so frustrating about the Bieniemy thing. I think.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so let's say he goes to Baltimore and he can't get their passing game going. I was just making this up, okay?
Yeah.
Is that on him?
No, and that's why this one bums me out.
I know everyone wants to paint Lamar Jackson as this great thrower of the football and that people are wrong. Lamar Jackson can throw the football. He is not a great pinpoint thrower. That's not the strength of his game. Now, you could also make the case that Lamar Jackson is so good at what he does that
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, and it's hard to compare his throwing ability to his other abilities. In other words, even his throwing ability really might be better than people think. It's so dwarfed by what he does well. But what if Bieniemy goes to a different team, whether it's Baltimore or anybody else, and he can't fix like take a team like Washington, right, that hasn't gotten their passing game going in years. If he can't fix a guy like a Taylor Heineke to make him a better player, then are people going to say, see, we told you so? Bieniemy wouldn't make a good head coach. See, that's what I hate about it. But Bieniemy feels like I've got to push my chips to the middle of the table and roll the dice here because I'm not getting another opportunity. And I admire that from him, because if you keep beating your head against the wall, Marcus, and expecting a different result, right? I just think it's a shame. And this ties into Mike McDaniel, that with Mike McDaniel, the first thing everybody was talking about was that he was biracial. The first thing people talk about with Eric Bieniemy is that he's black. These are just good football coaches.
Yes. Yep.
And it's super important that they're also minorities and other minorities get an opportunity as well. But if you make it only about the fact that they're a minority, you're discounting how good at football they are. Does that make sense?
I 100% agree.
I hope I navigated that properly. One last thing. You mentioned Tua. You said that you felt like Mike McDaniel would be best with a veteran quarterback. I guess technically Tua is a veteran now.
I meant Brian Flores would be better with a veteran quarterback.
Okay. Gotcha. I was a little confused by that.
I actually think Mike McDaniel is going to be good for Tua because I think he's going to make things easy. Like, I think Miami's going to get back to trying to run the ball, trying to use more play action, trying to get the ball to Waddle in space. I kind of think you're going to see Tua look a little bit like Jimmy Garoppolo, where they try to simplify everything for him.
By the way, I should be a little bit easier on people that tweeted out this news too, because they feel like they need to mention this because it's so obviously it's topical because of the Brian Flores lawsuit. So I respect that as well. It's just more lamenting the entire situation. And none of this would be a situation if NFL owners were just better about hiring minorities. Sure. That's the bottom line. We had another hiring, Lovie Smith in Houston. You know me, I've been on the record how many times now. Why let go of David Cully? I don't believe in the 1 year fix thing. If this is another 1 year hire, dude, I'm going to be furious.
Well, it sounds like his contract's going to be pretty short regardless. I saw the report, maybe 2 or 3 years. So I don't think Houston's looking at this as a long-term thing. But all right, why fire David Cully when you already had Lovie Smith on staff as your defensive coordinator? What benefit does it do to get rid of Cully and just promote Lovie Smith and have basically the exact same staff coming back?
I don't know. And I hope this also is not another response to the lawsuit. Because when the announcement was made that he's our coach for 2022, or there was the first tweet I saw on it was that maybe that's not how they said it. Maybe that was kind of miswritten. The first thing I thought is, okay, is this a 1 year stopgap so that you're just going to go find somebody else because you didn't like the market this year, right? Kind of like signing a veteran quarterback when you don't like the rookie class of quarterbacks coming in and you want to wait till next year. Does this feel like that to you?
Yes, I'm going to turn this back around on you. If the Brian Flores situation didn't happen in Miami, is Josh McCown the head coach of the Houston Texans today?
Oh boy, I would love to tell you no, I would, but a lot of people like Josh McCown, including myself.
Yeah.
And that if it was a different ownership group, Marcus, I'd say nah.
Yeah.
This one,
it's tough.
Yeah. I'll say this though, or a couple things here. This isn't unprecedented that an assistant gets the job of a coach who was kind of forced out. There are a lot of people that felt like Dick Vermeil was forced out after they won a Super Bowl to make way for Mike Martz. And Mike Martz was, considered an offensive genius at the time. And the Rams thought they could win with that. And they did. They didn't win a Super Bowl, but they did win. There have been other times that assistants have taken over. Probably the most successful example of all time of an assistant taking over for a head coach would be when Bill Walsh retired after the 88 season. His defensive coordinator, George Seifert, took over, and George Seifert won a Super Bowl his first year and then won it again in 94. So 89 and 94, Seifert led the 49ers to Super Bowl titles. And before Seifert took the Carolina job, he had the all-time highest winning percentage among all head coaches, believe it or not. There's a fun fact for you.
I thought you were going to say Jason Garrett when he took over for Wade Phillips. So
that's right, but that's it. But I'm actually glad. I'm glad that you brought that up because there were people that felt like Jason Garrett might have undermined Wade Phillips. I know you heard those rumors. I don't know how much I believe that stuff, but you hear it.
Can I add one thing before we move on? John McClain, the great writer for the Houston Chronicle, he said that the ownership would love to add Josh McCown to the staff. I think that's a terrible idea, an absolutely terrible idea for a couple of reasons. We love McCown. Like, I think you can make a case that McCown maybe should have gotten that job, but if they add him to the staff, it's basically going to feel like Lovie Smith's a lame duck coach in his first year, right? Because I think everybody knows that McCown's eventually going to get that job. So why do that and put all that controversy around your franchise?
Right. And, it's just a difficult thing to balance because on one hand, you and I are both saying the NFL's got a problem. They have got to get more black head coaches
Yes.
because there are plenty of guys that are qualified to coach in this game, starting with Brian Flores.
Yep.
On the other hand, we're kind of speaking out of both sides of our mouths, and this is what makes this issue very difficult to solve. Is we also want Mike McDaniel and Lovie Smith to be treated as good football men. Not as just black men that are applying for football jobs, right? Eric Bieniemy, like I said, is a great case in point. Eric Bieniemy played in the league, was a high draft pick for the Cincinnati Bengals. I have his football cards. I have Eric Bieniemy's score football card. Did you know that? Fleer.
I did.
I have his Fleer. Yeah. Did you know he was a Bengals running back?
I did know that.
I think he went to University of Colorado. I think.
Do you remember Chris Berman's nickname that he had for him?
Sleeping with Bieniemy?
Yes.
Is that right? Yes. Yes.
One of my favorites. Yeah. It's really good.
Anyway, so I'm just saying I acknowledge how hard that is, right? You want to take these guys for what their expertise is. At the same time, we have an issue in the NFL, so we have to talk about it. Have to talk about their race all the time. And sometimes those lines just get blurred. And I want these guys to be appreciated for how good they are.
By the way, just to put this on record, I don't like the Lovie Smith hiring at all.
Yeah, I know. We're going to get, so let's just dive into that.
Go ahead.
So every once in a while, there's what I call an MNT that goes out. You've heard of EFTs and stuff like that. It's what I call a Marcus Nation tweet. And what Marcus does is he'll get like a raw thing of red meat from the section at the grocery store and go out in front of a pack of wild dogs and just throw it out there in the middle. He doesn't care if the meat's expired.
Nope.
He doesn't care what kind of meat it is. He doesn't care if those dogs have eaten too many treats and they're going to get fat. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. So Marcus usually saves these tweets for a very specific genre. They're usually 86% Sean Hockley and then 14% everything else. But he did have a 14%er tweet this week where he said Lovie Smith is not a good coach. I cannot agree with you on that.
Okay. Make the case.
All right. I will make the case. If you wanted to say, I don't like the Lovie Smith hire for Houston, I don't think he's the right fit at this time, I'm with you. But saying a guy who has a winning record in the NFL, taking over two gigs that were in really bad spots when he took them over, getting a team to the Super Bowl, winning, having multiple seasons, not just one, multiple seasons. I think at least 3 of 10 wins or more as an NFL head coach. He had a 13-3 record. Look at his quarterbacks with the Bears, Marcus. Look at his quarterbacks. And I'm not done. And a very good defensive coordinator that helped the Rams get to their second Super Bowl. It was Aeneas Williams who picked off Donovan McNabb in the 2001 championship, got him that Super Bowl. Lovie Smith got a lot of credit for that team and was a strong assistant before. So when you start talking about a guy not being a good coach, you better take a look at it holistically. So there you go. That's my defense for Lovie Smith.
Lovie Smith has not been a good head coach in the last decade, and that includes NFL and college. His record is awful. And you mentioned the quarterbacks. I agree. His quarterback play is bad. But when you hire a defensive-minded head coach, that's a lot of the rub that you get there because those guys are not elevating the quarterback play, right? Because it's just not their specialty. Where you have other other coaches out there that can make average quarterbacks look really good. That's not what Lovie Smith does at all. He's going to put you. Hold on. He's going to put he's going to put you in situations though that make the quarterback look really bad. And
well, I can't say that. I can't agree with you necessarily out of hand on that, but I agree with you what your premise is. Your premise is this is not the right kind of hire for right now. This is a guy that has not been a really great coach for the last 10 years, and I don't like the fit. The problem is, you're not going to like me on this because I'm really going to be curmudgeon-y Carl, old man. Okay. But the difference between, I'm not going to say it.
Let me ask you this question.
Okay.
Let me ask you that.
Go ahead.
Jeff Fisher was a really good coach in the 2000s. He's not a good coach for the current NFL. Right?
Okay, fine.
That's my part. And maybe I should have expanded on that tweet a little bit. Lovie Smith was a good coach in the 2000s. He is not going to be a good coach in today's NFL.
Lovie Smith should have never gotten fired from the Bears. Now, I know he didn't do well with the Bucs, but I'm pretty sure his last year with the Bears was 2012. I just heard Brandon Marshall talk. I'm trying to remember what podcast he was on about how those guys all played for him. And I think that's the number one mark of a good head coach, including Bill Belichick. Do your guys play for you? Okay, Lovie Smith's last year with the Chicago Bears, here it is, 10-6. They scored 98 more points than their opposition, which in this day of parity is pretty doggone good, Marcus. Their defense finished third in the NFL in points against. Points for, they were 16th. So they were middle of the pack. So your point about appropriateness for this hire, I'm with you. But calling him not a good coach, I think it's like this, bro. All right, let's lay it down in Sean Hockley terms, okay? Okay, let's do Sean Hockley. If Sean Hockley makes a call and you were to tweet out, let's say Sean Hockley makes a bad call and you were to tweet out, Sean Hockley really needs to see that the receiver did not make a football related move right there. That's an incomplete pass. You're going to get about 75 likes. But if you just write Sean Hockley is a bad referee who hates the Cowboys, you're going to get 1,850 likes. And you know this. So when you say Lovie Smith is, I just don't feel Lovie Smith is the appropriate hire at this time for this team, you're not even going to get 50 likes on that. People are just going to nod their head. But when you say Lovie Smith's not a good coach, in this day and age, sports fans, they love the hot take that bags on people. So, yeah. So I'm just saying it was what I call an MNT. It was, granted, it was more the rare MNT. I
will say I'm really excited in 2 years when Lovie Smith goes 10-24 to retweet that tweet. So I'm just
don't root for that.
I'm not rooting for that. I want the Texans to be good again, but I just don't see how this helps.
Well, has he been so just using that example, 20 years from now, people are going to look at David Coley's record. They're going to be like, boy, he was a sucky head coach. That's not fair at all.
It's not fair. Although I will say that I think Lovie Smith is getting the Texans in a better spot now than what David Cully got. Even just a year difference. Yeah. I think Cully did a good job
with playing Davis Mills. I'm all over you today. I'm just stepping all over you.
Can we talk about Dennis Allen and the Saints? Because
I'm almost done. I just want to finish my glossary of this podcast. So we know I'm curmudgeon-y Carl, that I own it. But we need to start pointing out when there's some MNTs floating around out there. In Texas, we had green locusts, we had brown locusts, and we had black locusts. And you rarely saw the brown or the black locusts. All the locusts were always green. This was like a brown locust kind of tweet. This was a rarity. This wasn't the uber rare.
I don't feel bad about that tweet at all. I like that one. I stand with my my initial thoughts. I don't think he's a good coach.
Most people just drink like the big Wendy's tea, and you see them walk around their cup or whatever. My mom actually put a jar out there and made sun tea. This was more of a sun tea Marcus Nation tweet. It wasn't about Terrence Steele. It wasn't about Ezekiel Elliott, and it wasn't about referees. It was actually about a different team other than the Cowboys, and it wasn't about officiating. That is very rare that you get a Marcus Nation tweet like that.
Dennis Allen to the Saints, official. What are your thoughts? Yeah.
I don't mind this one now. I don't know how people feel. Again, we have a problem in the NFL, and I don't know how people are if they're going to feel that Dennis Allen is a retread. Because he fits the definition, right?
Yep.
He's a coach that had a bad record for a different team. And this has been part of the complaint. Why does a Dennis Allen get a job instead of an Eric Bieniemy? I think this is a little different because Dennis Allen has been the defensive coordinator there. And unlike Lovie Smith, where, Lovie Smith was just with Houston, 2 years?
I thought it was
a year.
A year.
1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is nothing against Lovie Smith. I just defended Lovie Smith to you.
Yep.
Dennis Allen has been there for several years. They have put it on tape, that defense. That defense is one of the best units in the league. They play hard for that guy. I think it makes a lot of sense.
It also makes sense because I don't think the Saints' job is as appealing as some of the other ones, considering they don't have a franchise quarterback. The cap situation is going to wreck this team over the next couple of years. You need somebody that can be a little bit patient, and they know Dennis Allen. They know that he can get these guys to play well on defense. Listen, we talked about this one last week. We kind of expected this to happen. I think it's really unfortunate that Eric Bieniemy went there and interviewed and didn't get the job, because now it feels like, hey, we just needed to hire, or we needed to interview a minority to satisfy the Rooney Rule. I hope that's not the case. I hope they actually had good intentions interviewing him and, maybe offering him the job, but I think we saw this one coming.
One interesting thing about Eric Bieniemy that you mentioned, or I thought you mentioned last week, we talk so much, I can't remember half your points that aren't about.
It must not be that good.
Yeah. So if Andy Reid is really close to calling it quits, then Eric Bieniemy sliding into that role makes all the sense in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And similar to what happened with Dennis Allen and Sean Payton here, Dennis Allen was not a hot name a couple years ago.
Yep.
And the sudden retirement makes it, and would you be shocked if Andy Reid said after next year, I'm done? Would you be shocked if Andy Reid a week from now said, you know what, I'm done. It's still early enough in the off season. I think I'm going to call it a day.
Not at all. Not at all.
Me either.
He's coached for a long time without taking a year off. Let's just be honest. He's had some family issues that have happened over the last couple of years that I wonder if he wants to spend more time with his family and take care of some of those things. So it wouldn't shock me at all.
So maybe we will get a situation. Now it's not like I'm hoping that happens with Andy Reid, but I wouldn't be surprised. And maybe we'll have Eric Bieniemy slide into that role. Yeah. And then we'll, and maybe Lovie Smith will be able to exceed expectations enough. The Texans will not bail. Yeah. I just don't trust it right now with that organization. So those are my thoughts on the head coaches.
All right. We got one more. We didn't talk about, I forgot to add this one in here. Doug Peterson got hired, I believe it was on Saturday or Sunday. Kind of went under the radar because that coaching search was wild. But do you think they got it right?
Ew, cookies.
Because my answer is no. I thought they had, of all, was it the 9 teams that had head coaching vacancies? I thought they had the easiest pick here, right? Like there was such an obvious candidate in Byron Leftwich, and Leftwich wanted to be there, and he interviewed twice, and it didn't happen. And I think we both know the reason why it didn't happen was because of Trent Baalke. Leftwich goes back to Tampa Bay, and it feels like they were forced to settle a little bit for Doug Peterson.
And I think this is why you're not hearing the uproar about Byron Leftwich not getting hired.
It was his choice. It was his choice.
It's his choice. But you should be hearing uproar about their interview process.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. I mean, just dysfunctional, nothing to do with a race, just making you sit in there and answer a question with the person right in front of you that you're being asked about. I don't think is easy for anyone to manage. I had to be honest with you. I had a little bit of a brain hiccup, whatever you want to call it, because I'm sitting there thinking of Doug Peterson shaking hands with his long-haired quarterback. And my mind kept saying, wait a minute, the Chargers don't have a new head coach. Because I was thinking of Justin Herbert.
Yeah.
And I kept thinking of Justin Herbert at the podium of the Pro Bowl, because I know that's one of the things you want to get to. And so I just had this weird moment. I'm like, oh, no, dude, Jacksonville. But yeah, that hiring seems like it was barely covered. There was a lot of talk about Doug Peterson's departure from Philadelphia and how much, what's the word? Not intervention, meddling there was from the front office.
From Howie Roseman. Yep.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Sorry, everybody. Sometimes you gotta sneeze. I I really wonder what happened there. I have some friends that are big Eagles fans, and you know, I just wonder what Doug Peterson's mindset was going into this job with Trent Baalke, because if that was true in Philadelphia and people don't want to work with Trent Baalke, is Trent Baalke a meddler? Did Doug Peterson feel like, hey, this might be the only job I'll be able to get? Boy, makes me sneeze. Thoughts? Your thoughts?
I don't hate this from the sense that Doug Peterson, I think, is going to be good at working with Trevor Lawrence. He's got a big Rolodex of potential candidates he can get for offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and filling out a staff. And I think that matters a lot, right? A lot of times you end up hiring coaches because they know a lot of people. And when you have a staff of 30 guys, that matters, right? It's just Byron should have been the head coach. Byron should have been the head coach. And it was such a slam dunk move. But for whatever reason, Shad Khan couldn't get past the getting rid of Trent Baalke part, which everybody across the NFL thinks he's awful, except for Khan. I don't get it.
Well, people, it goes to show that people really are comfortable working with who they're comfortable working with, which again goes back to our original point of why the NFL has a problem with the number of Black coaches. Is a lot of times it's people want to work with people they know.
Yep.
And after a while, that becomes not only dysfunctional from a league-wide race issue, sometimes it's just dysfunctional for your organization to win games.
Yep.
And that may be the case here. Did the Jags get the best head coach that was out there? I'm not against Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson won a Super Bowl.
Neither am I. I just thought there was a better match for them, right? There was a better match for them out there, and that who wanted to be there, and they didn't take it.
I wonder if just the other teams in the league were not serious about Doug Peterson at all and his agent, or he decided, hey, this is my best chance to be a head coach this year, and I'm going to deal with it and make it work. I was just surprised given the ending of his Philadelphia tenure, but I don't think anybody really knows exactly what happened there. So, okay. So that's enough about the head coaches, I think. What else you want to get to? Pro Bowl, right?
Pro Bowl. I watched exactly 0.0 seconds of the Pro Bowl. I was at Disney on Ice with my daughter. Way more enjoyable. Just telling you that up front. I saw some highlights and some lowlights of the Pro Bowl. Why do we even have this game anymore, Elliot?
Okay, so I will bring out curmudgeon Carl here in a second, but I could tell you a little story about the Pro Bowl. When I was at the NFL, one of my colleagues tweeted out essentially what you just said, but much less harsh. He got an email from a guy at the league office, higher up. I'm not going to say his name. And that we should be all promoting this game. And we were pressured to promote it on social media. And I never promoted the Pro Bowl on social media because I think the Pro Bowl is become, I don't want to say a joke. I think the skills competitions, they've gotten pretty creative with that. And I think that's cool. But look, guys don't want to play because guys don't need the money, and it isn't worth getting hurt to tackle for real. Now, curmudgeon Carl, I know you hate it, but when I say some things in the 80s really were better, Marcus,
this is the truth. This is the truth.
Yes.
I've watched those old Pro Bowls. This is the truth.
They were entertaining.
Yep.
And you, as a fan, you wanted to see your team represented, and it was a really big honor, and players rarely ducked out of the Pro Bowl. I've never been able to ask Darren Woodson this because I've never just run into Darren Woodson in my career, but I know a guy I worked with had asked Darren Woodson about the Pro Bowl. And I think Darren Woodson kind of lamented that he opted out one year for injuries because he never got back in.
Yep.
Guys hated missing the Pro Bowl. Darren Woodson made like 5 straight Pro Bowls in the 90s. And in the 80s, I mean, guys hit hard, even as recently as, was it 2007 when Brian Moorman tried the fake punt?
And Sean Taylor rocked him. Yep.
You just don't see that anymore. And I think that there's too many players have opted out now because of, do you have any problem with players opting out of the game?
Absolutely not. No.
It's just too much at stake, especially what if you're a free agent?
which a bunch of those guys are, because a lot of those guys that are playing in those games now are on short deals or they're on their rookie contracts and they haven't got paid yet. Yeah, I don't blame them at all.
Now, if the league guaranteed, like let's say you were an impending free agent and you suffer a really bad high ankle sprain in the Pro Bowl, and those things can linger, right? Mm-hmm. Or a Liz Frank or a groin injury, things that really have a hard time. They just linger and linger and linger. If the NFL will guarantee you franchise tag money at your position or fair market value, no matter how banged up you are, the next year, then as a player, I would feel really comfortable.
And we know that'll never happen.
Then that's never going to happen. Yeah. So what do you think they should do with it?
Scrap it. Just get rid of the game. Have more skill competition. I liked it when they used to do this is from like the early 2000s. They would have a throwing competition. Who could throw the ball the farthest? Or I remember the Larry Allen, the bench press. How many times could he bench press 225? To me, that's more enjoyable. That gets people excited. The game is atrocious. We just don't need it.
A couple things on that. So I saw a tweet this weekend from Carl Mecklenburg, who was a kind of a do-it-all player for the Broncos. He could play defensive end. He played inside backer. He played middle backer. Talking about difference between 4-3 and 3-4 back in those days. He played outside backer. They even occasionally would put him inside, like on the nose. The guy did everything. Really great player. His name's been up for the Hall of Fame many times or several times. And he tweeted out a photo of all the Broncos from, I think, the Pro Bowl after the 93 season. Mm-hmm. And it was, let me see if I can remember all the guys in the photo. Dennis Smith, who was a safety, John Elway, Shannon Sharp, Carl Mecklenburg, and Steve Atwater. And they're all in their Pro Bowl uniforms with no pads on. And Carl Mecklenburg captioned the tweet by saying, back when we used to tackle at the Pro Bowl. And this is as the game's going on. And dude, you look at Steve Atwater and the edge of this picture. He is so naturally big. And you're like, Oh my gosh, I forgot that there were some safeties in the league that were that big. I'm not talking about big, like jacked, like David Boston, where you're, anyway, I'm talking about just naturally big human beings, whether they worked out or not. It blew me away because he was every bit as big as Shannon Sharp. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows Shannon Sharp's build. But anyway, that was really, really neat to see.
Okay. Let's talk about the Senior Bowl. I'm done talking about the Pro Bowl. I know, Elliot, you're not a big college football fan or draft fan. That's okay. We're going to do a little bit of draft content here every couple of weeks. I just want to say that the Senior Bowl happened over the past weekend. It's the biggest all-star game of them all. It has all the top seniors around the country. This was actually a rare Senior Bowl because we had 5 of the top 6 quarterbacks in this class participated in the practices, played the games. So here's just 5 guys that kind of stood out to me from the Pro Bowl, or excuse me, from the Senior Bowl, and some thoughts about where I would like to see them land. So the first guy is Malik Willows. He's a quarterback from Liberty, 6 foot tall, 220 pounds. Pretty clearly has the biggest arm of all the quarterbacks in the class, easily the most athletic, but he's from Liberty. It's a small school. And you saw that in some of the drills, like he's pretty raw. I still think he should be the first quarterback drafted, but I would love to see a situation where he could go sit behind an established starter. Do you think like the Falcons with Matt Ryan there, do you think they're in a position to draft a quarterback and kind of wait?
Absolutely. I wonder, how much is Matt Ryan going to help a guy like that? It's easy to say Matt Ryan's a great guy, and of course he would do it. Man, I've met Joe Montana. I've heard great things about Joe Montana. Joe Montana wasn't wanting to help Steve Young. No. People think Brett Favre is an all shucks guy. Brett Favre didn't want to be helping Aaron Rodgers. And I heard that Tony Romo really wasn't wanting to help Dak Prescott early on either. So,
but Mark Sanchez always did.
Work that way.
Mark Sanchez in Dallas really helped Dak during his rookie year. So it depends on the quarterback.
Yeah. But I like what you're thinking here.
Yeah.
Because you pointed out before that Matt Ryan is not as young as people think he is. I think he turned 24 during his rookie year, I think. Yep. So that would make him about 38 years old. Or if he's not 38, he's darn close to it.
Yeah, he'll be 37 this offseason. And we've seen over the last couple of years, 37, 38 is when it really starts to kind of fall off for some of these quarterbacks. And I think we saw signs of it last year, Elliot.
Yeah. Okay. I remember that's right. He was 23, but the difference was Matt Stafford was a 21-year-old rookie. So got it. Okay. Who's your next guy?
All right. Next one, Kenny Pickett, a quarterback from Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. Probably the most consistent quarterback in this year's class and at the Senior Bowl. Tiny hands, though. He'll actually have the smallest hands in NFL history for a quarterback, 8 1/4 inches. Has to play with 2 gloves on. So I think his fit is going to be a little trickier than some of the other quarterbacks in this class. I would really like to see him go to a team playing indoors in the dome. And I think like in the middle of the first round to like the Saints, I think that's the type of quarterback. He's accurate. He throws with anticipation, timing. I think the Saints are in a position now where they can grab a quarterback and start to develop him. I'd love to see Kenny Pickett in New Orleans.
You know, I was a backup quarterback in junior high, and I played linebacker, and then I was our backup quarterback. And I have small hands. Now I make up for it by having very wide feet. But it is hard. It is hard. I mean, I have a good arm, but it's hard to grip the ball. So, you know, Gil Brandt taught me when there was a lot of talk about Russell Wilson's height, going into the 2012 draft. Russell went in 3rd round, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. But Russell Wilson had, bigger hands. He didn't have little hands like that. And so I get the concern on that. If for no other reason than watching the Super Bowl, I guarantee there's going to be a pass rush where Von Miller goes for that ball.
Guarantee it.
Yeah.
Guarantee it.
How pass rushers these days, a lot of times, Marcus, they don't go for the actual like sack in the way that we think of a sack, like tackling. Yeah. They get credit for a sack if they just knock the ball out and don't tackle the quarterback. But speaking of which, the first team I really remember doing that, the 2010 to 2012 Bears. I wonder who the head coach of that team was. He must not have been very good. He must not have been very good.
Moving on, the third quarterback from the game that I want to talk about is Sam Howell from North Carolina. Very similar in size to Baker Mayfield, 6 foot exactly, 220 pounds, but a much better runner. Still, I don't think he is the sum of all of his parts. There's just something missing about him. However, with how valuable rookie quarterbacks are, with how valuable that 5th-year option is, I still think he's a quarterback that's going to sneak into the first round. And I actually think a team that would make a lot of sense for him are the Colts. Now, the Colts don't have a first-round pick, but could you see the Colts maybe making a move to try to go get a quarterback, or do you think they're going to give Carson Wentz another year?
They may not have a choice, Marcus. I mean, sometimes you give guys another year because you don't have a choice. I think my question to you is, you said Pittsburgh's quarterback was more consistent.
Correct.
In what way over this prospect?
He's just a much better quarterback in terms of moving in the pocket, seeing the rush, delivering the ball down the field. Howell,
more polished.
Yeah. Pickett has like 56 career starts at Pittsburgh. Howell has a bunch as well, but he's really more of a first read of, I don't see it, I'm running with the ball. And we know those quarterbacks don't necessarily translate quickly to the NFL. I'd rather see Howell go somewhere. Maybe he can play behind Carson Wentz for a year and in 2023 be their guy there. But Howell had a good week at the Senior Bowl. I'm curious to see where he lands.
When you make that comparison, it kind of reminds me a little bit of when Phillip Rivers came out of NC State. What people loved about Phillip Rivers, even though he didn't have the perfect throwing motion, whatever, is he had like 51 career starts. He literally played every bowl game, every start. And so he was there's a catalog there where you could see how consistent of a player they were and how ready he was to play football. So on the pro level. So I get that. Okay. Who's next?
This next one, it's an offensive tackle from Northern Iowa. It's Trevor Penning. I thought he was very up and down during the week. However, he's tall, he's long, and he's athletic. And if you have those 3 things going for you, you're typically a first-round pick at offensive tackle because there's just not a lot of good offensive tackles in the NFL. And actually, Elliot, I went back the other day and I looked at all of the day 2 offensive tackles that have been selected since 2012, and there's been 45 of them. Can you guess how many have made the Pro Bowl?
Day 2 offensive tackles to make the Pro Bowl since when?
2012. So you're looking at like the last 10 years.
Golly.
I'll give you the
I'm going to go 5.
Go ahead. It's 2. It's Orlando Brown, and the other name is escaping me right now. It might be Teron Armstead from the Saints.
Yeah.
Armstead, freak athlete coming out. Orlando Brown had freak size coming out. But basically, if you're waiting till day 2 or day 3 to get an offensive tackle, it's a losing bet. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody in the late first round, even though Penning is pretty raw and unrefined, gambles on him. I'm even looking at like Cincinnati, at 31 or 32. If you want to go higher than that, like the Chargers, they need a right tackle so bad. Storm Norton was awful on that right side. I wouldn't be surprised if Penning just rises up the board because there's just not that many good tackles.
But conceivably, and by the way, what you really want on day 2 is a guard that holds a lot. Sorry.
You can find guards.
Kind of a Marcus Nation tweet that I was doing for you. See, they write themselves at this point.
Connor Williams, not a bad second round pick. I'm just going to say it. Go ahead.
I didn't say Connor Williams. I just said if you want a guard that holds a lot. Okay. If the Bengals pick at 32 because they're going to win the Super Bowl, in theory, they could maybe trade back, get your tackle with a team that really wants to get into the first round. We've seen that plenty of times. I think Bridgewater was a trade with Seattle, right?
So.
To get in on that last pick. That's the first one that's coming to mind. I'm sure you could think of others where a team wants to trade into that last spot or two.
And the last guy I want to mention, Jermaine Johnson from Florida State. He was actually on the Netflix show Last Chance U. I don't know if you've ever seen Last Chance U, but it's really good.
I thought you were going to say Cheer.
No.
Okay.
Last Chance U is like for junior college kids that eventually can play their way up to Division I level. Jermaine Johnson did that. I think he was the best player at the Senior Bowl by far. He's a long, athletic edge rusher with a ton of production. And in a draft class that's not very good, I would not be surprised if all of a sudden he's a top 12, top 15 pick. Teams that could use some edge rushers early, obviously the Jets, they have 2 picks at number 4 and number 10. Atlanta's always looking for more edge rush help. Cleveland maybe to help with Myles Garrett. Philadelphia at 15 and 16. The Chargers at 17. A lot of teams need pass rushers. I think Jermaine Johnson is a lock to be a top 20 pick.
Yeah, I like the Philadelphia Charger slant there because they could use it. Philadelphia's got a good front line, but there are some guys that are getting long in the tooth. And you could always look, especially when you have guys that are long in the tooth, line rotation. You're playing as many guys.
How the Eagles won the Super Bowl, right? They were too deep at every spot of the defensive line, and it's how they slowed down Tom Brady.
Is 10 a little high? Because you mentioned the Jets at 10th overall.
Probably. If you're the Jets this offseason, everything has got to be about improving that offensive line, right?
Well, that's what I think about the Bengals.
Both of them, right? Like,
yeah,
the Jets are only going to go as far as Zach Wilson takes them, and they've got to fix that offensive line. They got to give him more weapons. I know it would be tempting to add to your pass rush and that stuff, but they got to reinvest in the offensive line, right?
So of the 5 prospects you just gave us, give me the guy that has the highest floor and give me the guy that has the highest ceiling.
I think Jermaine
Johnson. Who's
going
to come in most NFL ready, highest floor?
Yeah, Jermaine Johnson. I see him, even if he's not a starter, just being somebody that's 5 or 6 sacks every season, really good in the run game. And he's so athletic that he's just going to get himself into place. Like, they might not be the highest quality sacks, but he's going to find himself making plays. I would bet on Johnson. The prospect with the highest ceiling, it's probably Malik Willows, the quarterback from Liberty, because you just don't see quarterbacks with that type of athleticism and that type of arm talent come into the league very often. However, Elliot, he might be 2 years away from being 2 years away. Like, he is a long ways away from being a high-level quarterback.
Is he as good as athlete as Lamar Jackson?
No, but after that, he's the next best. I mean,
Can he throw as well as Lamar Jackson?
Not coming out of college, no.
Lamar Jackson's not a great passer, but he's not certainly, we talked about that earlier, certainly not a bad
he
passer. He's just not great.
He has more arm talent. He's just not as consistent at all.
When discussing, you just kind of made me think of Joe Tryon in terms of a pass rusher that had a pretty good floor.
Mm-hmm.
A guy that didn't make huge waves this season, but made plays at times, right?
Yes, exactly.
Would he compete compared to Tryon?
Absolutely. Very similar too in terms of size and athleticism. So I think that's a really good comp. And listen, if you redrafted that 2021 class now, Tryon probably goes inside the top 20 picks or so. So I like that.
All right. So run down your 5 one more time for everybody.
Yeah. Malik Willows, quarterback from Liberty, probably the first quarterback drafted in this class. I'm guessing somewhere inside the top 12. Kenny Pickett, quarterback from Pittsburgh, probably a top 20, 25 pick, very much in the Teddy Bridgewater type of mold for a quarterback. Sam Howell, quarterback from North Carolina, athletic, big arm, just needs to be more consistent. Trevor Penning, offensive tackle from Northern Iowa, long, athletic, has all the traits, needs to get a lot stronger. And then Jermaine Johnson, the best player at the Senior Bowl, probably a top 20 edge rusher in this class.
So you like Johnson coming out better than Tryon?
I do. It's close up, but very similar prospects.
What about your tackle playing at Northern Iowa? Do you worry about the level of competition there?
Yes, but that's why the Senior Bowl is so important, right? Because before this week, we never got to see him go against an NFL prospect. This week in practice, every single day he's going up against guys that are going to be drafted in the top 50. And I thought he got better at every practice. And I think if you're a GM drafting in the back half of the first round, I think that's why his performance was so important.
I was reading this weekend about how Ali Marpet's agent wanted him to get into it at Senior Bowl practice because I can't remember what small school
Hobart
Marpet went to.
Hobart.
That's right. I want to say Monmouth, and Monmouth's in New Jersey. That's where Miles Austin went, actually.
You bet.
Monmouth.
You betcha it was.
What's that?
Said you betcha it was, of course.
Of course you know that. But that it worked and that people saw that Marpet had the toughness to go up against elite talent that he would need in the NFL. Can you think of any other kind of smaller school offensive linemen like that have panned out that you really like in the last few years?
I think Eric Fisher is the best example from this in 2013, right? He went from a borderline first round pick at the Senior Bowl or before going into the Senior Bowl. And by the time he left, he was the number 1 pick in the draft. And I know Central Michigan's a little bit bigger than Northern Iowa, but going to the Senior Bowl, performing well, got him drafted number 1 overall. And he's had a really good career. I think Fisher's actually a pretty good comp for Penning in terms of play style as well.
And Fisher was looked at as a total bust, and he turned himself into a pretty good NFL player. He's had a nice career. Maybe not number 1 overall pick, but I can name you a lot of number 1 overall picks that had worse careers than that guy. And when you talk about big schools, Marcus, I just want to point this out. I went to a big school. I went to the University of North Texas. I mean, the enrollment at UNT is well over 30,000. That's a good sized school.
Yep.
Some big schools are commuter schools and they don't have great football programs, and other schools are smaller and have great football programs. So sometimes that's a little bit of a misnomer. And there's nothing against my Mean Green. We had a couple of, NFL players. We had some good ones, but not nearly to the level of other schools in Texas. So
legendary,
point that out.
Legendary running back Lance Dunbar went to North Texas. Sorry.
He's not the only Cowboy to play there, just so you know. So Toby Goen, Hunter, went to North Texas, as did oh my gosh, now I'm forgetting my running back that played for the Raiders and the Cowboys. Oh, cookies. Number 49.
Jameis Olawale, of course.
I think Olawale played at North Texas too. Now I have to.
Yeah, he did. Of course he did.
I know. I just got to see this from my own eyes.
You know,
Patrick Hobbs. I don't know if you remember him.
Yeah, running back.
Miami and New England. He led the nation in rushing. North Texas actually had back-to-back NCAA rushing leaders.
Are you trying to sell people on going to North Texas?
Yes, and I think probably the best player the University of North Texas has had in recent memory I'm pretty sure Brian Waters, the offensive lineman for the Chiefs and Patriots, went there. Let me make sure I'm
in
right
the Cowboys. In the Cowboys for like 8 games.
Yes, in the Oh boy.
That's
Joe
our
Green,
show.
by the way, is the greatest player to ever go to the University of North Texas. First ballot Hall of Famer, first round pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers, 1969. Of course, Marcus knows this because he loves Steelers history. You should, in fact, if you have any Steelers questions, Steelers history questions, it's at Marcus_Mosher.
I'll give you a Steeler thing before we leave. Most playoff wins since 2017 in the AFC North. Bengals 3, Ravens 1, Browns 1, 0, Steelers 0.
You love it. I mean, you just love it. You're so pulling. Good. So Thursday, we're going to do the picks. Marcus is pulling for the Bengals hard. I could tell you that right now.
Betcha I am.
So we will do our normal Thursday podcast, and we will break down that game from every angle, hopefully not in a dry fashion. We'll do our very best. And I have to say, Marcus, that it's about time the coaching hiring carousel came to a close because, man, this really drug out. I mean, really drug out this year. I don't think we'll see it like this next year.
I can't wait to shake Sean McVay's hand at the Super Bowl and become a head coach next year. Should be a lot of fun.
I was just about to say, with all these wonderful thoughts, as always, I give you the last thought. Anything you would like to say, sir?
No, I think this was an awful head coaching hiring cycle. The candidates were not very good, and yet we had 9 openings. So I think I would be shocked if more than 2 or 3 of these worked out. So there you go. How's that for a hot take?
It's a hot take. So you can always catch him on Locked On Cowboys. He's the host, and on Twitter, where he tweets out most things that he believes with the occasional MNT. I also recommended last week that you guys watch the Ice Bowl doc. If you didn't do that, you might do it. But if you would like another recommendation, there are some old Pro Bowl broadcasts on YouTube. Type in one from the 80s and just look at the hitting in that compared to now, and you'll be shocked. I'm not saying it's like a playoff game, but it's just a different deal, totally different deal. So there you go. With that, we're going to roll out of here. We will see you Thursday around this time, 12 o'clock Pacific, and catch us on Twitter. And if you have anything you'd like for us to talk about on Free Flowing Friday, let us know. I'm going to give Marcus my MVP Offensive Player of the Year candidate, who's not being discussed nearly enough. That's on Friday. We will see you Thursday. Take care, everybody.